what we're doing is taking away the boogeyman to a certain degree when they're young, so they don't become adults going, I'm so afraid to look into that. I'm so afraid to actually know the truth. That's what happens. And I know because I was in that space. I remember being at a bookstore. I'm like looking over in this section that had a bunch of polygamy books.
Welcome back to That's Church. I'm Emily Call, here with my sister, Ashley Sanders. And today we're bringing you part one of an incredible conversation with Casey McFarland from the new podcast, Pioneering Paradox, which he co-hosts with Will Wood. Casey is known for his thoughtful Instagram account where he holds space for conflicted Latter-day Saints of all kinds. And he does beautiful work of bridging the gap between nuanced members and more orthodox ones. In this first part, we dive into something so many of us are thinking about. How do we talk to our teens about hard topics, especially the more complicated history of the church? Casey brings wisdom, personal experience, and compassion to this conversation, and we know you'll come away feeling more grounded, open, and connected. He also leads guided tours in Italy with his wife and is currently planning a Superstition Tour with Patrick Mason. Super cool. And big news on our end, we just launched a nonprofit called That's Church. And Casey graciously agreed to serve as an executive research board member. We can't wait to share more about what's coming soon. Great things are happening. And be sure to come back for part two, where we get into Casey's beautiful experiences with interfaith learning and connection. Casey McFarland is here with us today from Pioneering Paradox, and we are so excited to delve into a discussion that bridges the generational gap. And he's here to help us understand how we can both heal internally and externally. So welcome, Casey. We are so happy to have you on.
Hello, it's so good to be here.
So I have been so impressed with your Instagram account. It is one of my favorite. You just have such great insight. I love it so much. And your main platform is that you are interested in helping our youth to understand and be kind of more honest and truthful with the younger generations with our church history. Which I think is so important, and I think could help to really help people to not have the struggles that they're having within the church later on or within their own faith dilemmas.
Yeah, I think it is actually more of an adult issue because, we have some narratives that we kind of grew up with that have shifted a little bit because of the information age. And I think we know better now. We know a lot of information. We know a lot of stuff, but I think the kids are actually learning a lot more than the parents are, because it's all information's everywhere nowadays. So to me, it kind of, I didn't post for a long time because I felt like maybe that it needed to catch up. Like I felt like it became nowadays, I feel like it's almost so ubiquitous. It's so everywhere that I'm like going, oh, this isn't going to be a revelation. When you start talking about difficult parts of history, it shouldn't blow somebody's world up to, as much as it would have maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so, but I do think it's very important, because I think especially with youth, young people, they value more than anything authenticity. And there's very few places and institutions that we can trust any longer. And what we're talking about here is trust, and earning trust of young people, so that they have at least one place in the world that they can go to their parents or their church leaders or the church or whatever, that can maintain some sort of integrity. And then they go, oh, I know there's one place I can go. I know my parents are going to shoot me straight, where everywhere else seems to be just one big marketing ploy or whatever it is. So I think at the root of all of this is trust. And I created Pioneering Paradox because I realized that the only way to talk about these things is to be able to show both sides to a certain degree. Like there tends to be a lot of stuff, like if you read like people who, there's a lot of podcasts that kind of show all the negative aspects of religion and the Mormonism, whatever it is. And because it kind of swung the pendulum. And then on the other side of the arena is like just telling about all the good things. Literally, like a lot of our publications have been whitewashed from history and just kind of like scrubbed clean to sterilization. And that doesn't help anybody. Like if you're just telling all the good points, I think the more interesting thing is getting into the paradox of how something can be good and bad at the same time. And when we don't do that, we set expectations we're still setting expectations historically, and in other ways that are setting up kids for failure, in my opinion.
Yeah, completely agree.
It makes so much sense.
I just look at it and I go, I'm a photographer. This is my hat here, my photographer hat.
Awesome.
I've been a photographer for 20 something years. We'll get into, I own a tour company as well, which I'm going to talk about that too. But I got a commission to go do a photo shoot for the cover of a magazine at the church history building with Stephen R. Snow, who was the head of the church. He was the head of the church history in the Latter-day Saint community. And prior to him was Marlon K. Jensen. And those two were the ones who initiated and launched the book Saints, the Saints series. And that kind of like that kind of started telling a little bit more of a broader story of even some of the bad parts of our history, so that it's not such a shock to people's system.
Yeah.
Even that has been scrubbed a lot and went through panels and correlation departments, but it was a good start. But I had this photo shoot with Stephen R. Snow, and I told him, I said, listen, there's this concept that I had some of my own priesthood leaders telling me, look, you got to give kids, the milk before the meat. And I'm kind of saying, today kids are getting fed T-bones. Like, you don't get that choice. You don't get a choice of whether like you're going to tell the history or not. Like, it's going to be shown, even just by an innocent search online or something. If they're researching for a lesson in church, stuff is going to pop up. And he said something to me that I think is really, really important. He said, there is a huge difference between telling a kid difficult parts of history when they're 12 years old, as opposed to them finding out when they're 28 years old. And I think the reason why is because all testimony is based on history. It literally just means that you're a witness to a historical event. So if a kid like bases their testimony on an event that you find out later on maybe it was different than what you thought, that throws people for a big loop, and they go, well, I'm questioning everything now.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm very much in favor of getting the story straight and like setting the record, and let's get it out and let kids choose what they want to choose, because so many of them are leaving anyway. In my opinion, we should just like at least give them the opportunity to build trust.
Yes. Yeah. And like you said, it's more of a shock to the system, I think, to learn about these things later in life. And I like that you said it's more of an adult problem, because this is like the age of information, and you can get on TikTok or Instagram and see videos about it when you don't even search it. Yep. So it's, and I also think though that, I mean, some of those videos, are dramatized or, not totally factual, but I also think that when we were growing up, the term like anti-Mormon literature and stuff, like it was so like no and so taboo that like you didn't want to hear any of it. Yeah. And I think that's also changing, because I think what we've considered to be like anti-Mormon, I'm doing air quotes if you can't see me, is sometimes just history. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it really is like, they push it too far or lie about something. But I think a lot of times this quote unquote anti-Mormon information is history, and nobody's perfect. Joseph Smith wasn't perfect. It's not, I mean, go back in the Bible, so many of the prophets were chosen because of their faults and because of their, because of them not being perfect. And so I don't know, I totally agree with what you're saying here. And I think it could help the next generation and the older generations too, to maybe heal a little faster.
Because the reality of it is that people, when we set it up and we whitewash a human being, then we kind of throw out the possibility for us to kind of wrestle with some of these things. Because the truth of the matter is, yeah, Joseph Smith did some amazing things and did some things that were hurtful. And I would much rather have been a church setting where we go, let's talk about this. Let's wrestle with this idea, because we literally are still setting when we whitewash, and because the truth of the matter is most of the apologetics that's coming from the church is also not factual. And the most of the anti-Mormon, if you want to call that, is not factual either. Like the truth is in the middle, because you look at the literal, anyway, that so that literally, when you whitewash things, it literally sets people up to have an expectation, which we'll get into with Buddhism. This is where Buddhism comes into play, because when you talk about like setting expectations, it's the expectation that gets shattered that causes faith crisis.
Wow.
And so what we're talking about is, that's one reason that could happen, but there's a lot of reasons, but that is one big one, is the expectations we set from early on of how things are supposed to be. Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, we put them on a pedestal, we whitewash them, and then you find out something different, and that's an immediate, like, life-shattering thing for some people. So this is not just about faith, it's about mental health and emotional health, because when somebody goes through a faith crisis, and oftentimes happens when they're in their mid-20s and they have little kids. I think it was Richard Eyre was on a podcast, and he was talking. He was a parenting guru. He was on Oprah and all this stuff. He's a Latter-day Saint guy. He was talking about we have to stop. We have to prevent as much as possible young people from blowing up in their mid-20s while they're trying to raise kids. Think of how deep it is, the amount of energy it takes for somebody to try to wrestle through these things while they're trying to raise little kids, and go, I don't know what to do here, and all that sort of thing. A lot of this, I think, being honest, like literally, when Jesus talks about building your house on bedrock and not sand, to me, when we whitewash the story, you're literally building a foundation on sand.
Great analogy.
And so I look at it, go, look, where's bedrock? Bedrock is just the truth that we have. Like we just say it how it is, And I started taking my kids down to, when they were young, down to the Mountain Meadow massacre site. And talking, this is a little much, but I took them down. We did some service projects down in Colorado City in the polygamous areas. I'm like, these are your cousins. Around, but I'm like, let's open this up. I told them the entire history of polygamy, and we just busted up and just went, look, let's have at it. Like, but it has so much more to do with the adults being willing to have the conversations, because the kids are already having it everywhere. They're having the conversation everywhere but church and in their homes with their parents.
Yeah.
And that's not a kid issue.
Wow.
And from my perspective.
Well, from firsthand experience as a mom who did have a faith crisis with little kids, I can honestly say that there were days where I would just lay on the floor and cry. And I'm so glad that I'm past that. I'm in a very great place, actually, with my spirituality, but it was hard to do while raising children. And I really admire so much that you are talking to your kids about these things. I'm trying to do the same, but it's hard. Yeah. And it's hard to know what they can handle at what age. And I'm sure we'll get into more of that as well. But I really admire you for taking them and having those conversations. And I had that realization actually watching a documentary on the FLDS church. I was like, how easy it would have been for us to have been in that church. I think that you can like draw some similarities, and it freaks me out a little. There's a lot of similarities. There are. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I think it's important. I think in an information age, we're still in some ways operating the same way we were in the 90s and 2000s. And it's just not working. So it's far more interesting. The fact of the matter is, the kids like to have these conversations when they're younger. They're 12, 13, 14, 15. A lot of them, at least my kids, I'm like, let's bust this out. Let's have this conversation.
Yeah.
But there's a danger in like I think sometimes not also emphasizing the positive aspects.
Yeah.
It's really easy to
I
get
think
stuck
I
on
think our relationship with the church is a relationship, and
that.
when you're married and there's an issue in your marriage and you're not honest about it, that is the most hurtful thing. Like it may be something really damaging to your marriage, but
Yeah.
it's so much better to say it from the beginning and not hide things. That's when the most damage happens, is when something is hidden. Because also with the church and with any relationship, I think if something is hidden, then you wonder, is this something I should be ashamed of? If they're hiding these things, is this something we should be ashamed of? Is this something they're hiding for a specific reason? Oh, that is crappy. Well, maybe, and then you your system is just like freak out,
Yeah.
and panic and feel betrayed. I think that's the biggest thing, is your relationship with that person or with the church then feels betrayed. And that is the worst feeling.
And it's really hard to recover from that.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
far easier to recover. Like I think we would gather and actually keep a lot more young people in if we were right up front, and as people went, I know that that's a place I can go where I'm going to get a straight answer.
Yeah. The trust has
Yeah.
to be built
Yeah.
from the very beginning. And as soon as that trust is lost, it is so hard to regain
Yeah.
that trust.
Yeah.
So true. And then the other thing too is kids, they get the message that I can go to this place to talk about difficult things.
Mm-hmm.
The message that's overwhelmingly being spread across is like, this is not a safe place for me to talk about really difficult things that I'm struggling with. And so I see what's happening as kind of a little bit of an awakening, and not just in our church, but a lot of other religions, where I think this is a good thing, that in so many ways we're like, there's an upheaval to a certain degree where we start to go, you know what, maybe we need to relook at, and as adults, we need to do some deeper inner work here. And by the way, this is another place where Buddhism becomes so useful. Because we start dealing with triggers, and we start dealing with what meaning did I place around this? Why when I go to church do I have like this these hurt feelings, and you have to really investigate the source of some of these hurts and pains that we have. And that's a very Buddhist thing to investigate, and we can get into more of that later, but that's the thing. We have to remember, like I have a lot of people say, the history doesn't matter to me. I hear that all the time. Like literally our entire story is built in history. Like from the first vision to the Garden of Gethsemane to everything, history is extremely, extremely important. And it's not the only reason people fall away from the church or struggle or have faith crisis, but statistically, it's a big factor.
I believe it. Yeah. And it's interesting. I wonder if those people would feel the same if we were talking about the good sides of history. If we were saying like, well, we're going to take out these songs that have historical meaning, or I wonder if they'd feel similarly. It almost feels like they're more saying, I don't care about that part of our history.
Yeah.
I'm just going to ignore that part of our history and focus on the good, when, like you mentioned, it's just so much more healthy to focus on it as a whole.
Well, we look at scriptures as a history.
Yeah.
And that's a good history we focus on, So why not focus on the history of our church as well, or know about it? I think language too. I think giving kids and people the language and the information is so helpful, because a lot of times we borrow on the testimonies or the belief systems of our parents. And so at least I think that was our generation. It's getting better and becoming different. But if we give our kids options, even like we take our kids to different religions, different churches, things like that, like giving kids the whole, all the information, and saying like, here it all is laid out. What do you believe? Here's what I believe. What do you believe? It's actually your choice. Like you actually get to decide what you believe. You don't have to just believe what I believe because I'm your mom.
That's awesome, because the truth of the matter is a lot of kids, one, I think at the root of a lot of this is a lot of kids feeling like they don't have an option. Like, and so that becomes a real problem. That becomes literally a source for rebellion.
Yeah.
And so they're going, I never had an option. Like, I've watched so many people go down that path where, like, I just have to get out of here. Like, I have to do something different than my parents because they never gave me this option. So I love what you guys are doing, because you're going and visiting all these different places, and I want to get into that. I want to tell you one other thing that I'm thinking about here. Literally, the word integrity, the root word is integer, and this is the only math that I know. That it's like, it means it's a whole number. And integrity just means you're able to talk about the whole package, and I think we're out of integrity right now. And I think we have been, and we're learning to like, in bits and pieces, have more integrity around our own story. But wow. I want to say this too. Sometimes people end up, when we're not able to tell the full story, people end up a lot of times feeling crazy, because they're going, my parents are judging me and saying this, but I'm looking at this other part that's really hard to grapple with, and they don't even know that it exists, and it makes me feel crazy. Like, and so acknowledging the pain, acknowledging those difficult things, actually is good for mental health and emotional health too. But that we could do, literally, we could go on days for this, because it's there's so much to be said there. But anyway.
Oh, that's
you said something too that I want to get into the mental health side of it, but just going back a little bit, you said something about like the progression of, you said, well, I guess you talked about taking your kids to, certain places and introducing history to them. Is there like a progression that you would suggest to people? Like, don't tell your kids about this yet when they're 5. Don't, like, is there like, and maybe it's just a natural progression that parents kind of fill out on their own.
Yeah.
But do you have advice there?
I think every kid's different, but at the same time, like, just having that open conversation is just a matter of fact. Like, hey, yeah, my daughter came home from, and by the way, being able to talk about the negative things gives you a permission slip to open up to the positive things with anybody.
Yeah.
It literally gives you a permission slip. If you're like on the defense with somebody who's like against the church or against religion, and you're like not willing to acknowledge the bad parts, you have zero credibility with that person.
So true.
So you have a permission slip. My daughter came home when she was 14. She's like, Dad, did you know Joseph Smith married like 14-year-olds or something like that? I'm like, that ain't nothing. I'm like, let me I'm like, here's all these other things. And then it opens this gap of like, oh, I'm willing to go there. Like, and then we have the conversation. But he also built a city. He also, like, we go into this whole other aspect. I'm like, boy, it's all here. It's all here. So when it comes to like, I feel like, honestly, this is another adult thing. Talking with these things, it doesn't have to be the entire conversation. Maybe it's like 1 or 2% of your conversation growing up with a kid. Like, it can be just like, it's not something you have to harp on every single day, like pounding a key on a keyboard. But maybe it's just something you're like, hey, every once in a while we pull it up and we say, look, here's this happened here. Like, we did some bad things here. Or whatever it is, from polygamy to, I don't know, translations or whatever it is. My daughter, we went through all this, by the way, and she ended up going, I'm going on a mission. Like, it's like, and everybody's different. So she found value, and literally some kids are just going to be like, I don't resonate with that at all. And this is not a path I want to choose.
Yeah.
That's something we have to come to grips with as adults, to just realize some kids are not going to choose this, but at least you're maintaining trust.
Right.
And going back to that age, I don't know the answer to that. And some kids don't care. They're just like, this is my tribe and I don't care.
Yeah.
And some are like completely have a more intense personality. I'm one of those. I had like my siblings are like, and I was like, this blew my world to bits. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I think it's case by case, but at the same time, I do think by the time somebody goes on a mission, they should not be learning about these things while they're in the mission field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
I don't
agree.
think investigators should be learning it two years later on an internet search. I actually see that as unethical.
Wow. Completely agree.
That's my own opinion.
And that's it's a sad and beautiful thing that you're able to take that pain that it caused you, and you're now able to flip the script with your own kids and raise them in a way where they know you trust them and that you want to understand them. I think kids want to be understood and they want to be trusted and respected. And I think some parents forget that the respect goes both ways. Like if
Yeah.
you want your kids to respect you, you have to respect them.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you are absolutely doing that with your children. And it's just such great advice to kind of let your kid it sounds like your daughter sort of led you to, or sort of opened the door to you to give her those answers. You know what I'm saying? And so
Yeah.
it's a good thing to look out for with our own kids, that when they start to bring up these questions, maybe that's
Yeah.
the time that we can let them know, like, I'm here and I will let you know what I know.
But I think the key is setting the tone in a family that there's no question off limits. Like my kids, they don't, I mean, this is probably a lie. I was going to say they don't withhold information from us, but they do. They got all the they do.
If they're teens, they do.
Yeah, but for the most part, they're willing to talk to us about a lot of different issues because we've tried to set the tone that this is a safe place to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, the alternative is they go everywhere else for locker room chatter.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, and the other way else is not going to be woven through a narrative of faith.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
yeah. I'm glad we're having this conversation. My son is really excited about preparing for a mission right now, and he'll be a senior this coming year. And I see so many better things in him than I served a mission as well when I was young. And I think like I was so much in this little box, and I see who he is. And I think our family is very similar. We're very open about everything. Yeah. And I think our kids know that they can come to us about anything, and they do, and of course they're teenagers. I'm sure there's things they keep from us, but I know that they know that there's nothing off limits for sure. But it does make me think, does he know all of these historical things? And I'll throw things in sometimes. And I think like at church, we often say, just have your testimony be part of the conversation and part of your everyday, just regular, normal conversation. Yeah. I think that's the same with things like this. And we kind of do. We kind of, I'll be like, did you know that Joseph Smith had a wife that was 14 years old, or whatever. And just let it be like a normal thing. Like, isn't that interesting? But I do
care, but yeah.
Yeah. But I'm glad we're talking to you, because it makes me think like, okay, and maybe there's some things I've missed that I need to catch up on before next year. I've got a year, but I do want to make sure that he is aware, of certain things. And I think it helps them to be more well-rounded, and really find themselves and know who they are, so that they can present who they are and their actual belief system when they're teaching and when they're being a missionary, throughout their mission. So
I think that's so. And a full disclosure, my definition and my aim with spirituality is to be able to walk in just about any space and not feel like I'm getting triggered or getting so I say that because I don't want my kids to walk on eggshells. Mm-hmm. I don't want them feeling like there's going to be some boogeyman poking around some bush. And what we're doing is taking away the boogeyman to a certain degree when they're young, so they don't become adults going, I'm so afraid to look into that. I'm so afraid to actually know the truth. That's what happens. And I know because I was in that space. I remember being at a bookstore. I'm like looking over in this section and had a bunch of polygamy books. I'm like, that's a big trigger for me. Mm-hmm. And I'm going, I know I'm not supposed to read those. And I'm afraid to, but I feel like I need to. And so I don't like spirituality. To me is like literally getting to a place where you can kind of like just be unaffected by a lot of that stuff, if that makes sense. And to be able to be into a space where somebody can have a chat with you, and you don't have to blow up or react or anything, just listen.
Yeah.
And that's a good place to start for adults, is to go, am I in a space where I can hear anything from my kids? That's a real deep spiritual work there.
It is.
To be able to be in that space. And that's a lot of inner work. I think that was one of the things we were talking about, was like about the inner healing that we're kind of called to. I think that's the biggest spiritual work of our day right now, as adults, and to model to our kids. Like we can be in that space. We can be in a space where we're able to hear things and not react. But our world right now is like, and has been, is so polarized that people react so quickly. It's like divided down this conservative, liberal, CNN, Fox News, in the church, out of the church. It's rare to find a space where you can go, it doesn't matter, I don't care. Like Neil A. Maxwell had a great comment where he said, if we can get to a place where we can blow away the chaff and get to the kernel of a human being or a religion or a political party, and find out what the real motivations are that are almost always good motivations, then we can start talking about people in terms of humans instead of they and others.
This is so fascinating to me, all of this. Like, how much time we got? I could talk for hours, because I just I want to soak all the knowledge off you, because you're saying things that really resonate with me. And I for a long time felt like we don't owe an explanation of our spirituality to anyone. Like if we want to gift that to someone, we can. But I think this whole, like you were mentioning, defending ourselves, I am just me and my spirituality is what it is. And I don't need to defend it to anyone, because I'm that confident in it. And I allow others that same respect. I'm not going to fight you on your beliefs. If you have questions for me, that's great. We can have a conversation, but I'm not going to fight. I'm not going to try to shove anything down your throat. No. And I do think that that is a difficult thing when we are in a world where everything is so divided. I couldn't agree with you more there.
When I was struggling and debating, we were planning an exit strategy to leave the church for a little while there. But I was, in my mind, I went, you know what? One thing I do not want to do is just do the turtle program, which I just moved from one shell to the next. And it's like literally people what ends up happening so often is people take one extreme, I know this is true without a shadow of a doubt, to I know this is not true without a shadow of a doubt. And for a period of time there, I literally, we kind of grew up in and every religion kind of grows up in an idea that we're the puzzle piece. We are the puzzle. Like everything revolves around our religion kind of thing, right? And I literally I wanted to throw the entire puzzle out until I realized that, you know what? We actually have a really beautiful piece of the puzzle. We're not the entire puzzle, but we have a really beautiful piece to share with the world. But that's kind of where I came to this conclusion of just going, this doesn't have to be all good, all bad, all true, all not. It's there's a paradox here, and the paradox is where the growth comes. It's like plate tectonics. It can either when there's that friction, it can either push you down or it can push you up to see a little higher heights, and to be going. I was more interested in changing internally, not just changing my shell, if that makes sense, because that really is what ends up being the deeper spiritual work. Whether somebody stays in the church or religion or not, that's a common ground that we have. If my kids decide, in our home, what we try to do is say, that's the more important work than actually staying a part of an entity or an institution. I'm more interested in my kids continue striving to have some kind of internal shifts. I took this Hindu class, and I was kind of having some holy envy, because I was like, they have this beautiful concept called moksha, which it's the objective of the original objective of Hinduism is moksha, which means liberation.
Yeah.
And Maya is the kind of the enemy to that. It's like the obstacle to that. And Maya means illusion. And I was sitting there going, oh man, I wish we had some language like this. And then it dawned on me that we actually, First Nephi 8 through 11, with the tree of life, literally is with the fog and all that stuff is it's the illusion. Like we're all kind of stuck in this kind of like mist of darkness. Every single one of us is caught up in an illusion. But the end goal for Lehi is he's in there, he's eating the tree of the fruit from the tree of life, and it represented the pure love of God. I don't think anything could represent liberation better than just feeling total love for all human beings. Like it's written, it's like just it's semantics. You start seeing that all these religions are at their root kind of saying the same thing, that we have to like liberate ourselves from these illusions that we have, that people are liberal or Democrat or Republican or Biden, Trump, whatever. This is that is getting caught up in just ego. And so that's the work that I'm hoping to pass on to my kids, whether they stay in or out or whatever. That's the deeper work.
Amen. That was beautiful.
Those analogies are awesome. I'm going to use that turtle one. That was amazing. So good.
So true, though. The love of God, or feeling love for all human beings, has to be the greatest thing that ever can be felt. And I think that's what I picture the gospel to be. That's what I picture us trying to achieve here on earth, is to accomplish that, to love unconditionally everyone without bias, and that's hard to do. We're human, but it is, I think that's the goal. That in my mind, that's the goal.
It's easier to love people from other religions.
Yeah.
The hardest work we have, and the most fruitful work, there's a great book that I can recommend called The Dark Side of the Light Chasers that goes into shadow work. Like the concept that Carl Jung, the psychiatrist, came up with is this idea that the things you despise in other people are often the things that you see inside yourself that you don't like about yourself. That's why sometimes it's hard to go to Thanksgiving dinner. And because our family is sometimes the one that's the people closest to us. But I think the work that has to happen for people who leave the church, and I'm speaking, or people who stay in the church, either way, they have to look past and go, this is probably my most fruitful ground, rather than running away from it. Maybe that's the place we need to kind of sit with for a minute and go, why do I not like these people right now? Why are anti-Mormon people, quote unquote, like triggering me so bad? What fear are they bringing up in me? This is where Buddhism comes. I'm telling you, this is we can get into that, the Four Noble Truths, because this is all tied into the Four Noble Truths, I think. But this is, I don't know. I think this is fruitful. I think it's a starting point. I don't understand why somebody would believe this. It should be the starting point.
Yeah.
All right, let's follow that thread. Let's follow, why is somebody a Democrat? You dig deep enough and you go, okay, there's a reason. Something happened in their childhood, or something that like makes them feel the way they're feeling right now. Everybody has a story, anyway.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I've always loved the quote, be curious, not judgmental. If you're feeling that judgment rise up and you turn it into curiosity. And I think that's what you're saying there too.
I love that. Yeah.
That's great. I'm so excited about the Buddhist stuff. I can't even tell you.
Yeah.
Are we
tell
going
us, that's a good, tell us, what are the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism? Why are they important to you?
Yeah. So I think this is, first of all, I want to before I forget, I've been wanting to say this somewhere, but this to me should be a daily teaching in the MTC. If I were like, Buddhism should be like this is part of us emptying our cup and like being like, okay, it's time for us. I think we're moving into that phase as a church. I think as a church, we've been in the stage of faith of like adolescence to a certain degree. We know everything. And I think we're moving into a stage of faith now where we're going, all right, we've been exposed to a lot of other world faith wisdom traditions that maybe we can glean something from somebody else. Mm-hmm. What a beautiful notion. Like that we have the ability to like put our guard down and go, tell us, teach us. Like we have something to offer. We'd love to hear what you have to offer. Let's all move in the same direction. But Buddhism is fascinating because it really has stood the test of time, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. Does not have to be a religious thing that could be taught to our people. Buddha didn't mean for it to be a religious thing. It was just like literally a set of tools. Like this is what I learned that helped me emotionally and mentally, spiritually be of sound mind and rid myself of some suffering. And so the four noble truths are, the first noble truth is that life is suffering. That there is, that no matter what we do, things will arise. I lost my brother-in-law, very, very difficult for my sister, car accidents, death, illness, all these different things are going to happen. And what Buddha discovered was that there's like, that when we try to make them something different and we crave and we desire something to be different than that, we cause ourselves, the second noble truth is that's the cause of suffering. The cause of suffering is like, that this is desiring things, having preferences about that we don't want to be in this moment, instead of just embracing it and going, this is just part of life, causes more suffering than the actual event. So we start to put meaning around it. Like almost all therapy, whether you're talking about Tony Robbins or self-help or therapy, is based in these four noble truths. Mm-hmm. We really, there are a lot of therapies like, let's get to the root story of the story you created about this event that happened in your life. And so it's so simple. Really what it boils down to is that we either are stuck in the past or in the future, oftentimes. And Buddha was trying to say, the past is regret, and that's nothing you can do, and you're wanting the past to be different, and that's causing you suffering in the moment. Now you're thinking about what the future should be, and you have fear for the future, and that's causing you pain. So meditation became a mode to be able to be present in the moment. I think oftentimes in our Western tradition, because it's so new, Hindus and Buddhists, they've been doing this for thousands of years. We're like, hey, let's just do it because it helps people relax in school or whatever. This is a deeply spiritual practice of letting stuff that triggers us boil to the surface and just observing it and sitting with it instead of trying to push it down and pretend like these pain is not happening. It has more to do with just accepting the fact that it's happening. And so you can imagine, like, if you're in a classroom with a bunch of missionaries going out who don't really know how to cope, who don't really know how to sit down with their emotions very well. Coping is a big issue right now with kids coming home from their missions. Sit down and teach kids how to take a deep breath and meditate and get into the present moment. Quit thinking about what you did in the past. Quit thinking about what you did in the future. This is something that we do on a regular basis with my kids, try to teach them how to regulate emotions through taking a deep breath and being mindful about the situation. So honestly, if you learn nothing else from Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths are based in that concept. And the fourth noble truth actually goes into what they call the Eightfold Path, which is like being compassionate and all these different things. There's a whole other thing that you can research, but that is, in a nutshell, stopping and going, why am I suffering right now? It's because I have a preference or a desire or a craving for this to be different in the moment. And this is the root of all faith crisis. Because all faith crisis is rooted in an expectation or a preference of the way it's supposed to be. And when we have God, when we discover that God is way bigger than we thought he was, that expectation is shattered, and we have moments of pain until we kind of settle into the realization that God is way bigger than we thought he was, or she.
Thanks for that.
I know. I was thinking
I
that.
love that. Oh my gosh. That is like mic drop, all of it.
Mm-hmm.
So powerful.
It's so basic. It's so simple. And like
Yeah.
literally, I think when we start understanding meditation, you're like, okay, this is just a practice. This is a practice of learning how to be in the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
That imagine the problems that we solve, like, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Huge,
Mhm.
huge.
that's Buddhism. And I think what's so beautiful about Buddhism, is that you start to kind of study and you go, oh my gosh, there's so many things that we've done within Mormonism that Buddhism is trying to achieve. Literally just the non-attachment of like accepting a mission call for 2 years and going, I'm just putting my hands up. I'm not attached to the outcome here. Is a very Buddhist thing to do.
That's true.
Accepting a calling. I'm just going to accept it. I'm just going to go, and I'm going to not have attachment to the outcome here. Is a very Buddhist thing to do.
Wow.
There's some really interesting parallels there. Anyway.
I love that. And expectation. My husband and I read a lot of like self-help and marriage books, and we have from the day we were married, just to make sure our marriage was the best that it could be. And
Awesome.
expectation. It always comes back to expectation. Like if you have the expectation that he's going to be this way, you're going to be disappointed, because that's just they're their own person, and they can change and they can stay the same, and they're just going to be who they are. And if you just not lower your but just have zero expectation, then you'll be happy. Like that's it. I think a lot of times that's what it comes down to. So, and I think that's in life as well. Yeah.
I mean, you can see how it goes right back to those Four Noble Truths. So much of it, you can start tracing it back and going, oh, this kind of stems from that first origin, 2,500 years ago. That's awesome.
Yeah. We've talked about like inner healing, and I was going to ask you what would you tell people that are already suffering, that are already in pain through their faith crisis or faith struggles? And I think probably you already answered it, but do you have anything more than that? Like how do you focus internally and help heal yourself when you're already in it?
I think therapy is a good place to start, because a therapist can help you and kind of like separate your story from reality. And I don't know if you read Adam Miller's book on Grace is Not a Backup Plan, but his definition of sin was living in your own story, like living a small story. Like you're like, I'm going to create this own little. In Buddhism, they call it samskaras. It's like a scar, a wound, and you hold on and you start to cling to it, and you start to build story upon that wound. And so a therapist can help you kind of dissect that and go, okay, let's get to the root of where this story started. And so I think that's a good place. The other thing is just time. But in my humble opinion, this could be argued too, but I don't think there's any other option in the end than gratitude. All of it, anger. Most anger is really just grief disguised. And I would say use the anger to do something constructive. Gratitude is such a balm, but I think you have to go through the steps to get to gratitude. And I don't know if you've ever read Richard Rohr's book, The Falling Upward, but this hit me between the eyes when I was in the middle of really deep anger towards the church and struggling with some really deep things. He talked about how you're kind of moving into the second half of life, like a more awakened, enlightened half of life, when you have gratitude for the first half of life. And when I read that, I wanted to throw up. I was like, I do not. I'm like, wow. I really actually thought I was like like awakened until I read that, and I went, I'm not even like, to me, there's like a pinhole at the end of this tunnel that represented gratitude for me, but that was just enough light to move toward. But this goes back to paradox. Like, I think sometimes I also play the advocate of trying to help people who hate the church doubt their doubts, doubt their certainty is what I mean to say. Like, you're so certain that the church is so bad. It says let's throw some doubt into that, and gratitude and learning and remembering some of the things that the gifts that were given to you by the people who sustained you, gave all their volunteer time, gave all of their paid vacation to take you snot-nosed kids on a scout camp or youth conference. You start to kind of open up to different possibilities. So I would just say, try the hat on. You don't have to keep it on. Put the hat of gratitude on and start moving in that direction. And feel all the feelings along the way of feeling like, I don't want to let go of this. I'm angry, and you have to experience all those things. But the very last stage of faith, is and this is one stage of faith. Brian McFarland's stage of faith is harmony. And before that stage is perplexity. It's like you're stuck in like anger, and you're trying to learn your own authenticity and all this stuff. But moving into harmony is a space where you start to give people the benefit of the doubt and just say they tried their best. And my parents, this is when parents, everybody, you start to move into a space where you go, I can feel the intention there was good.
I think gratitude and grace are so important for your own mental health. I agree. And I think also sometimes, like when we teach little kids how to pray, we say, first you tell God what you're grateful for, and then you can ask for things. I think sometimes when we pray, I think that's why prayer can be so important, even if we're not feeling like we're connecting with the higher power, because we are showing gratitude. It's actually a mental health exercise.
I think that's such a good point.
And like I've read many of the self-help books I've read have talked about gratitude and writing down, something you're grateful for each day, or thinking of something you're grateful for each day. That's prayer, and I think sometimes when I'm not praying, even if I'm not connecting with God, which I do feel like I connect with a higher power when I pray, but not always, honestly. But if I am conveying gratitude and love, that is helpful to me, and a lot of times when I pray, just now I'm on a tangent of prayer, but a lot of times when I pray, I'm actually just not even sometimes saying words. Sometimes I just think about the people that I love and I just feel love for them. That's my prayer. or I just internalize something that's not in words, that is just kind of like going out to the people that I love. It works for me, and I think it's a form of gratitude and a form of love as well, and it's healing.
Totally. I call that a montage prayer. I do those sometimes, like a movie montage, flashing.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Yeah, that's
must be a sister thing. Yeah, so we both do that.
I think that this goes back to that paradox again, because I think it's important to maybe also say that during those grief and anger stages that'll be there our whole life, even when you feel gratitude, you can feel both gratitude and anger at the same time. I don't think you should stop like trying to make things better just because you feel gratitude. Like, and that's something I wrestled with, because I'm going, all right, I'm moving into a space of gratitude. I don't want to say anything bad about anything. No. I think actually our prayer can also be yelling and screaming, and I think God, Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother, actually can handle. I mean, this is kind of like they can handle our grief and our yelling and our anger towards them even. And I think there needs to be a place for that. But that's just so that's something I've wrestled with, because on one hand I'm going, I want to see change. I want to see stuff. I want to be grateful and show my gratitude, but also see change happen at the same time. And that's a wild paradox to kind of step into. But there's a lot of fruit there spiritually, I think.
Completely agree.
Well, if
Yeah.
we've learned anything from Inside Out, you do need all emotions.
Yeah.
Show, yeah.
Oh.
I've never seen it, but
You haven't even seen the first?
I don't think I did.
Oh, I think
You would
you'd
love it.
appreciate it.
Okay, I'll have to watch it.
You'd like
You
it.
would love it. But yeah, I think about that stuff about oftentimes when I'm thinking about my connection to my heavenly parents, I think of it in relation to my own children, you know, and I think that it's so true. I never thought about that part of it, though, that I mean, I've definitely had my cry, angry prayers with God, but I've never thought about it being okay to do that. Like, I've always felt really bad afterwards, but our children are going to yell at us. It doesn't mean they love us any less. You know, I think that that's such an important reminder for people. And I wanted to say, going back to when you were talking about how we need to look at each other for like loving each other where we're at. It's so much easier said than done. And I think when there's a period of time where when people leave the church or when they're still in it and just grieving, like, I love that you said that gratitude is the balm. That really just hit me to my core, because if you're so angry at someone for doing something a certain way, you can find at least one thing that you're grateful for from them or from the church or from something in your life, you know, some kind of spark. It's the people I have the hardest time with are the ones that say, you know, the church only did bad things for me, or the comment of, I can't even imagine how they stay. And I think to myself, well, you did until you were this age.
Yeah.
So why can't you give that grace when you were that person? I think it's so hard. And again, I think that's a lot of times that's how they feel at the beginning. And then they get to be to a more, not such an angry stage, but it is fascinating, these conversations. Like, and I do think in our church, I'm sorry, now I'm going off on a tangent. This stuff is just so fascinating to me, but I was just thinking, I love Buddhism as well. And, or maybe it was just a story. I honestly do not remember where I heard this, but when we hear the phrase like life is suffering, that sounds so dark and sad. And it's like, oh, I don't want to believe that. But the way they related it was that if you tell someone to walk through a forest, and while they're walking through the forest, someone in a bear costume jumps out at them, they're going to be extra terrified. It's going to be, you know, terrifying. Yeah. But if beforehand you told them, hey, there's a weirdo hiding in the forest, he's in a bear suit, look out for him, it's kind of funny, you know, it's going to scare you, but at least they have some warning. And I think about that all the time with, like, in our church, and when you talk about whitewashing, we're taking away that warning. You know, we're basically saying, like, do all of these things in a perfect row, check off the marks, and you'll have a great life. And it's just not, it's just not helpful, you know, like, even if you do everything to a T, everything perfectly, you're still going to encounter suffering. And so why not have some warning on it? And why not have some truth from the very beginning?
Perspective, like, that's so wide. And interestingly, I was thinking about this the other day, that the church actually has a lot of lessons on trials. You notice that? True. Like, there's a lot of, like, I think we're entering Pioneer Day, and we've used kind of a lot of our own stories to illustrate how you can bear suffering well. I think it's an interesting part of our heritage. I think is, I don't know. It's just something to reflect on, because we did have a lot in our heritage, and it's something that kind of has buoyed us up a little bit, you know.
That's true. Yeah,
that's a great
so
point.
It's kind of an interesting thought, but I'm curious for you ladies, what, because, you know, we share so many interesting, like, there are very few people who, like, I watch you go out to explore different religions, and I think that's why we were both like, oh my gosh, there's somebody else like me out there.
Yeah.
So true.
Totally.
What was the catalyst for that? Like, you go visit a lot of and you have people on your podcast from different religions. What's the motivation?
We've always really been interested in religion. I can trace back like many instances throughout my life where I wanted to be more part of other religions or just know about them more and felt ashamed that I wanted to, or was with people that I was like, hey, let's like in New York for my senior trip, I was with some friends and I was like, look, this is a Catholic church. How cool is this? And they like I can picture it so vividly. They gave us a book that was full of like songs and we could hear them singing. And I so badly just wanted to go in and they were like, no, we shouldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was so weird. Like I just was interested in what they were about, and they were actually having a service, but they would go into the buildings and be okay with exploring that. But I never saw anything wrong with it, and I think a lot of people are so scared of it. And so when I got married to my husband, I relayed that to him and he's like, yeah, we will someday, and we did a couple of times, but not really. And then Ashley and I were kind of talking and we both really like it. We went to San Diego for a girls trip. And we both were like, we want to tour this church, this mission, this Spanish mission. And we both went in and our other friends didn't want to come in or didn't want to tour. We went in and we ended up in the chapel and we both looked at each other and we were crying at the exact same time. And we're like, dude, like we must feel the same about this. And our grandpa was Catholic and our grandma was LDS. And I don't know that she was even super active in the church, but my mom's siblings all were. They went with people that were part of the church, I think. But my grandma always said there is good in all religion. And that kind of stuck with us. Like my grandma Maxine, she's an icon. And she just was such an amazing person and probably the closest person in my mind. She was the closest person to being a Christ-like individual. Yet she wasn't really active in her religion. Beautiful. And so that was so inspiring to both of us, I think.
Yeah. And of all people, she could make friends everywhere. Yeah. I think that's something that, we get nervous to talk to people about their religion. I mean, I can say firsthand that I would have never asked someone about their hijab or, their religion in that, out in a public sense. And now I do it all the time. Yeah. And people are never offended. It's never something that they, I think it's the fear is in us. And so, yeah, it's been really fascinating just getting to know people. I just love humans and I wish I could know every single human brain, which is why I love to learn about religion and crime docs, which I know do not go hand in hand, but it's all just very fascinating to me to see why we as humans do the things that we do. Yeah. So that's my little answer, but that was very nice of you to ask that. Thank you so much. Yeah. And I'm sorry for us talking so much. I think you nailed it though, that like we're all just so in it. And we've been calling these conversations more than interviews lately because we just have lots to say because we're so intrigued by it. So
yeah. What drew you to be more interested in other religions? Thanks for listening to That's Church. That wraps up part 1 of our conversation with Casey McFarland. This episode was overflowing with insight. We seriously couldn't pick just one clip to share on Instagram because there were so many powerful one-liners and meaningful takeaways. We loved hearing Casey's thoughts on how to be more open with our teens, especially when it comes to faith, doubt, and church history. His honesty and empathy are such a gift. In part 2, we'll shift into a rich discussion about interfaith experiences, what Casey learned visiting over 50 churches with his family, how sacred texts like the Bhagavad Gita and the Quran impacted his views, and why curiosity might just be the most healing force in faith conversations. We can't wait for you to hear more about it. Follow us at That's Church Podcast on Instagram, and we'll see you soon.